I'm delighted to chair this session. I am Teresa Dent from the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust. I recently retired as Chief Executive, but I'm still involved with the Trust with large-scale farmer collaborative conservation projects, including one called the Environmental Farmers Group. We have a great lineup of speakers this morning, all sitting behind me, and I will introduce them as they speak. But let's start by reminding ourselves what natural capital is. It is the value of everything that comes from nature: soil, air, water, all living creatures, the biodiversity. And natural capital gives us, people, the essential means for life. It supports society and the economy. So why should natural capital matter to you as farmers? Well, your natural capital is an essential part of your ability to produce food, and regenerative agriculture is all about that production whilst and through improving your own natural capital on your farm. But there are broader issues around this. The world has taken its natural capital for granted. It's attached no economic value to it. Historically, we've used it for free, and that means we've depleted it. We're now shifting to a natural capital economy that does put a value on natural capital. And for farming, this started when Mr. Gove said that the basic payment scheme, BPS, was going to go, and farmers instead would be rewarded for the delivery of environmental goods and services. But the second strand to all of this is that developers, road builders, and corporations are being asked, either through legislation like biodiversity net gain as part of the 2021 Environment Act, or voluntarily through things like TNFD, Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosures. They are being asked to mitigate their own impacts and dependencies on nature. And you, as farmers, are in a position to supply natural capital to them to help them do that, to enhance your natural capital to meet that demand, those new markets. This session, using case histories, is designed to explain those opportunities to you and to simplify and demystify these new activities. I should declare an interest. I am a board member and possibly could be described as the instigator of the Environmental Farmers Group, which is a farmer-led cooperative dedicated to helping farmers work collaboratively at river catchment scale to generate ambitious environmental outcomes and to monetize those outcomes through the natural capital markets and the access that being part of a collaborative group gives you. Which brings me on to the last point I want to make before we start. At the end of the 5 speakers, we are going to have what Groundswell has called a speed dating session. Very exciting for this time in the morning. So you, as farmers, are all potential suppliers of natural capital, and we want you to have the opportunity to speed date with the demand side of the market. And our speakers and anybody else who feels they represent the demand side will be standing at the back of the tent at the end of this hour, holding up their sign and happy to talk to any of you who would like to talk to them. And if we get a queue, we'll give each of you 4 minutes. So if you are a demand side natural capital person in the audience and you would like to go speed dating later, please go and talk to Digby at the back. Do go now, and he will write you a sign so you're ready later. So we have 5 speakers. We're trying to stick to time. Each of them has promised me faithfully that they will not overrun. So hopefully after each speaker we'll have a time for a couple of questions. If you don't get time to ask a question after each speaker, save it up and we'll have hopefully 10 minutes at the end. So our first speaker this morning is Chloe Palmer, who is an old friend, and she has been helping farmers deliver natural capital in the uplands in the Peak District through farmer clusters for many years. She's an independent ecologist, and I know that she's one of the best farmer cluster facilitators in the country. So Chloe, welcome.
No pressure. Is that on? Yeah. No pressure there then. Thank you very much, Teresa. Thank you for the introduction. So I'll get straight on because we've not got much time. So when I started my 3 farmer groups, which I'll say a bit more about now, we were still in the realms of the Lawton Report, bigger, joined up, landscape scale. We were still talking ecosystem services then, which sort of morphed into natural capital. So briefly, I run 3 groups in the north of the Peak District. The longest established is Hope Valley Farmers, which, as the name suggests, is based in the Hope Valley, sort of between Sheffield and Manchester. We've been going since 2017. We've now got over 50 members. We include moorland, in-by, a whole range of different habitats. The next group to come on stream was Bradfield Farmers, who kind of looked over the hill from the east side of the Peak District, saw what we were doing in Hope Valley and decided they wanted a bit of that. So that started up in 2019 and has now got over 45 members, and growing all the time. And then literally just in the last month, I've taken on the Hayfield Farmers group, which was originally run by a local sustainability group called Transition Hayfield, but they've asked if I could take it on this year. So that's just in the early stages, really, just getting underway, and that's over in the west side of the Peak District. So effectively we're covering 3 water catchments. We've got the Mersey in the west, the Derwent into the Trent in the middle, and then the Don in the east. So and all similar sort of landscapes, and all dark peak character area. So and all within the national park. So we're funded by a facilitation fund for Hope Valley, and then FIPL, Farming in Protected Landscapes, for the others. We do training events. I provide regular bulletins and newsletters for my farmers. I give them telephone advice, and we try and support them through all the environmental delivery that they're doing. And we've also done a range of projects, which I'll come on to. So briefly, I don't know how well you can see the screen, but that sort of shows the geography, with Hayfield in the west, Hope Valley in the middle, and Bradfield at the east. And then you've got the Sheffield and Manchester either side. So I think over this time, we've had a lot of successes, and I think one of the main ones has been the level of engagement we've had from our farmer members. We get new members inquiring and joining us all the time. The existing members are always keen to come along to everything. I get certainly weekly, often daily when the sun's not shining and it's a rainy day, inquiries from members about one thing and another. And whenever we do projects, we always get an instant sort of positive response. And we recently did surveys for both Hope Valley and Bradfield, which just showed how much they appreciate being part of the group, the social engagement with other farmers, which they probably didn't do much of before. And I think one of the single most important things that they say is just having that point of contact. It's such uncertain and difficult times for the industry at the moment, as you all know. And dare I say it, particularly in the uplands, where farmers have relied on what we would call a brown envelope, perhaps more than other areas. And just having somebody that they know they can just ring up and ask any question, I think gives them a lot of reassurance. So in terms of delivery of what you might describe as natural capital, we have done quite a lot over the period of years, and this has included hedge planting. I've got the figures there, just remind myself. Just over 17 kilometres of new hedges, over 18,000 trees we've planted. Those, by the way, were kindly donated by the Woodland Trust, so big thank you to them. We've done a WADA survey, which currently involves over 40 farms across the 3 groups, which has been incredibly important in providing a baseline of what breeding WADA birds we've got. So curlew, snipe, lapwing and oystercatcher are the 4 that we're focusing on, and it's shown us where we can target efforts in the future. Severn Trent generously funded a soil health project a few years ago in the Hope Valley, which has sort of provided a really good precursor for farmers starting to make better use of legumes and lime, and actually at the same time quite dramatically reducing fertiliser use, because they realised that actually in most cases it was lime that was needed to boost growth in the first instance. And so that's been key. And yeah, so moving on, whilst I think, you know, overall the groups have been a tremendous success, and I think the responses we get from our members show us that, we do face quite significant challenges, particularly at the moment with very uncertain funding. The funding we've had in the past, facilitation funding, I'm sure you've heard, those of you who are involved, not fit for purpose, very process driven, not really interested in outcomes. FIPL's brilliant, but it's short term, and there's not a lot else out there. So we've always got this kind of worry about where we're going to go next, how we're going to continue, because obviously there are quite considerable costs associated with running a group. We look at green finance. It's obviously, you know, heralded as the next big thing, but for the uplands it's very, very difficult. We've got a very high baseline, we've got a lot of valuable habitats, so we haven't got a lot of headroom to actually deliver much more, and that causes a problem. When we did a recent soil survey, it showed that we'd already got 100 tonnes plus of carbon in most of the grassland soils. Where do you go from there? Similarly with BNG, when you know there just isn't that headroom to do a lot more. So I think that is going to be an opportunity, but it's going to be quite limited for a lot of our farmers. The next thing we're going to have to look at is becoming a legal entity. That's not straightforward. Thankfully, FIPL is providing us with some advice to actually find out a bit more about that. And I think one of our biggest challenges is the fact that farming in the uplands is incredibly marginal. You know, these farmers are operating on a shoestring. I bumped into one of my farmers the other day. He farms 1,000 acres. He's driving 30 miles 3 nights a week to do a milk round just to support his family. You know, that's what they're up against. So where do we go from here? One of our main focuses is obviously trying to get some funding to carry on post 2026. This and looking at the legal entity. We are looking at landscape recovery, potentially with the Peakland Environmental Farmers, which is a cooperative, which Teresa may say more about at the end, which overarches the whole of the Dart Peak area. And many of our members are also members of Peakland Environmental Farmers. We've got the hedgerow project continuing again this year. We've already had lots of interest, so I'm hoping we'll be up to 3 or 4 kilometres of hedges once again. And we're also looking at a potential project looking at reducing anthelmintic use, because I think that's one of the big issues for us in terms of insect populations and declining populations. Continuing the WADA survey, and then, as I say, linking further with Peakland Environmental Farmers to look at opportunities for green finance and further building natural capital. Thank you. Sorry, did I keep to time? Okay.
Well done, Chloe. And yes, you did keep to time. So if there are any questions for Chloe, please stick your hand up. Phil, we do have a roving mic, I think. Where's the roving mic? Here she comes. Kirsty in the front row.
Chloe, I just wonder whether there's a potential of marketing your produce. You're sitting between Sheffield and Manchester, and on the shoulders of natural capital, if that private finance doesn't materialise, is there? You've got the provenance, you've got the brand, you've got the environment. Surely you've got a symbol of a bumblebee or a butterfly or even a lapwing, Teresa, or a grey partridge, that you could market your produce through. I just wondered whether there's a potential there to bring money into the group.
That's a really good question, Phil. I think, firstly, quite a lot of our members are doing that individually, more in Hope Valley, I think, than in the other groups. I think it was tried before. There was an organisation back in the early noughties called Peak District Beef and Lamb, which got quite a bit of funding, and it did get off the ground. But it was quite short-lived. I don't know the ins and outs of why that failed. But we've talked about it. But the response I've always had is, oh, well, we've tried that and it didn't work. So we've kind of put that on the back burner. But I think given the success we're seeing of quite a few of the local businesses, again, it's if we can foster that collaboration, that's potentially a way forward. I think the kind of meat box thing, because again, basically we're talking meat. There are no dairy farmers left in any of those groups now, except one in Bradfield. There would have been 70 15 years ago. So we've got quite a limited offering. But yeah, I mean, maybe that is an opportunity. But as I say, when we talk about it with the steering groups, which are the management bodies that work with me, there's not a huge amount of enthusiasm.
Thanks. And we have another question.
Thanks, Chloe. Just wanting to ask about this headroom issue that you mentioned about there's so much already done, first mover advantage issues. In markets, that sort of goes to the question of additionality, I guess, in terms of financing. But there's also the question of retaining and maintaining and stewarding. And one shouldn't be penalised for being a good steward over the years. There may be markets for avoidance of disruption, avoidance of other sort of perturbations to the biodiversity particularly. Have you looked at any of those opportunities?
That's a really interesting point. It's something that we have looked at, and I think the conclusion we've reached in relation to that at the moment is that the main payment mechanism for that is going to be public money. The big issue we've got in the uplands is that a lot of the members are stuck in higher level schemes, the environmental stewardship, the old scheme, and at the moment, when we ask Natural England and the Rural Payments Agency, we're told that they cannot come out of those schemes and transfer into sustainable farming incentive or higher tier, even though a lot of them are in multi-designated sites, which is incredibly frustrating. So that's actually massively limiting what they can do because they're stuck in these schemes that are now 20 years old. So as I say, public money seems to be the main mechanism. But if anybody knows of any finance out there that is playing, particularly you mentioned about the lack of disruption, we'd really love to know about that because that's what I think is so deeply unfair.
Well, is anybody in the audience who wants to join the speed dating to offer avoided loss funding, please go to the table at the back. Thank you, Chloe, very much. Our second speaker is Alex Robinson from Zulu Ecosystems, and they've been looking at how to analyse the landscape and look for natural capital opportunities. Alex, thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to give you a little bit of insight as to a couple of the landscape projects in the Idle catchment with Severn Trent Water. That's Nottingham, that's the northern one. And then down in the south with the Environmental Farmers Group across the Testenich and Hampshire Avon and Dorset Stour. But I've got, before you sort of get into this bit, and I can see a couple of guys enjoying their sandwiches, the biggest sandwiches I think I've ever seen at the back there. I've got one critical message for you, and it's that water is the absolute key. So whether it's your farming enterprise or you're looking at delivering or creating biodiversity units, carbon units, whatever it may be, think about it in the context of the impact that project can have on water flow, water quality, water availability. It's the critical connector. So just that is my overarching message, but let me try and put a bit more meat on the bones for you. So we've started out, the sort of first stage for us is the landscape analysis stage. So you can just about make out the image there, hopefully. That's the Idle catchment. We've created with Severn Trent a hydrology map, which really looks at the most impactful places to try and intercept water flow within the landscape. So that is basically where we want to, if we're trying to impact flow, where we want to target our efforts. But from a landscape perspective, we've put together a whole host of data sets to try and give us an understanding as to what might be happening in that catchment and where may be the most impactful places to deliver a project or for the greatest opportunity. The second stage there is that landholding analysis. So it's trying to go from the landscape and narrow in very specifically for the individual farmer or landowner so that they can see how they sit in the context of the landscape, but also see what's directly relevant to them. And the third stage is then around trying to identify and find projects with them. So where are they actually open to doing and where is most impactful, where is most marginal from an agricultural perspective, where might they be open to doing a woodland creation, a peatland restoration, a grassland or wetland creation project. And the fourth stage in there, which we've done with Severn Trent, is around quantifying the hydrological impact of these prospective projects. So if we were to do them, how much impact would that have on, in this instance, slowing the flow of water downstream? And the critical piece underpinning this is demand. Where is the demand coming from? Who is the demand to try and actually then pay for and monetize and make happen and make financially viable those projects on the ground? So the idle catchment with Severn Trent. So we've spoken to about 30% of the farmers and landowners, or that cover about 30% of the catchment. We've come forward and they've put forward nine different projects covering just over 500 hectares of land that they're open to putting into woodland creation, grassland and wetland creation, and grassland or pond and wetland creation. So we're sat there with, in essence, what might be seen as some of the lowest hanging fruit, the areas that are, one, most impactful from a hydrological perspective, but two, areas where farmers really want to do it. We've just got to make it financially viable for them. And then the graph in the top left there is what we've been measuring for the impact. What is the impact that these projects can have? So how, if we were to do them against a 1 in 10 year baseline flood event, how much would they be able to slow the flow of water downstream? So can we extend that lag time and basically give the water more of a chance to slowly move down? And can we reduce the peak of the flooding to try and limit the impact of it? We've also been working with the Environmental Farmers Group, where we've covered across the three clusters here, about 600,000 hectares, so massive landscape area to run analysis on. 150 individual odd members within that, of which about 19 have stepped forward, and with them we've covering about 12,000 hectares, and with them we've identified on the ground about 465 hectares of purely woodland creation areas that they are again open to doing. And what we've then done with those farmers is we've then put in, and the landowners, is we've done what we call a woodland creation scoping report. So it's basically trying to give them all the critical information to enable them to make an informed decision. So one, looking at the physical suitability of the planting sites, the legal and regulatory constraints. How hard is it going to be to get through? So try and removing all those sort of showstoppers in the first instance, and then looking at what's this project going to cost you to do. So the analysis over the delivery and the maintenance over a 15-year period. How much grant availability is there under UK and the Woodland Creation Planning Grant? And then ultimately, how much carbon is it going to sequester under the Woodland Carbon Code, and some value analysis around that, so that the farmers can sit there and go, right, this is viable, this is the stage at which I can start to enter the market, or I can go ahead and do that. And this is ongoing, and actually we've just had another project that came in 2 days ago that we need to scope. So these projects are both still ongoing as we speak. This is my last slide, I promise, and I just wanted to try and get across some of the opportunities that I'm looking for, some of the areas that I'm looking for on the ground when I'm speaking to farmers and landowners as to how I'm identifying possible intervention areas. So it can be as simple, which pretty much everyone can do, as looking at the field corners. Is this, it's not just, doesn't matter if it's grade 3, grade 4, or grade 5 land, where can the machinery move? Where can the livestock move? Can we start to move some of these, difficult field corners, the dog legs, can we take them out? Is there a screen or a road is there a road or something that you want to screen or block? You don't want to see the traffic going down it. Those are all perfectly good reasons for wanting to do a project. Is there a footpath along the side of a river, and you've got livestock in that field, cattle for instance, and you're going, well, actually I just want to mitigate the risk of some form of conflict between the cattle and the footpath and the walkers on the footpath. That's a perfectly good reason for looking to do a project. You might be looking at infrastructure and how you can impact that. You might be going after purely the additional grant value and looking for the additional value, or the highest value that might be there. You might be looking at erosion features. That's the sort of top in the middle there. That's a farm in the idle catchment. I took that in January. And the image below is our hydrological map, which sort of put me on in the first instance, directed me towards that. That is an absolute shocker to see that. In January, it doesn't help the farmer, it doesn't help the water system. These are exactly the places we want to target from a habitat intervention of some description. But also from a connectivity buffering and sort of nature connectivity perspective, it's trying to put the farm and the projects that you might be doing in the context of the wider landscape. So it's not just about how it impacts what you're doing on your farm, but how does it connect in with the landscape around you. And that is my last slide, because we can put it together on our platform, and anybody who's interested, please come and see me in speed dating.
Alex, thank you very much. I think we've got time for just one question, if there's a quick one. There's a hand gone up over there. If anybody else has a question, just store it until the end and we'll come. So it was the lady.
Hi, Alex. Very quickly, how does the work of Zulu Ecosystems then relate to the nature recovery networks? Everybody's doing lots of mapping and planning.
Yeah.
So obviously you've got to try and fit in with that.
Great question. So we've been doing our mapping is all at a national level. So whilst we've been working with quite a lot of the local nature recovery strategies and feeding into them, particularly trying to understand where the priority areas are from a community perspective. So that, I think, is the really valuable thing that's coming through. I'm afraid I'm having seen the inside of the mapping of the local nature recovery strategies, and I don't want to be too mean about it, but there is some very significant problems with it, not least how we joined 48 different local nature recovery strategies together. Anyone from an engineering perspective can see that is now going to be an absolute disaster. So I'm questioning as to how viable the mapping is there. There's going to be elements of it which is very valuable, which is really where people want to prioritise it. But I think we're going to need national base maps, and so that's how we've approached it. It's how we're working. And there are others working this in the same way, but it needs a national base map, not individual base maps, because you can't tie them together at all easily.
Alex, thank you. Now, our third speaker this morning is Tom Curtis from 3 Keel, who is going to talk to you about the LENS initiative, Landscape Enterprise Networks, aggregating demand-side corporates. So Tom has already done battle with the M25 this morning, so he's had time to relax and recover. And Tom, over to you.
Thanks very much, Teresa. No, my heart rate is now just about calmed down. So hi, I'm Tom. I'm going to talk about LENS, Landscape Enterprise Networks. LENS is a service that helps businesses to club together to pay for activities that help build resilience in the places that they're dependent on. So those businesses can be water companies, they can be food manufacturers, they can be infrastructure companies, they can be insurance companies, they can be local authorities. And then the other side of the service is that we pull together groups of farmers who can deliver those activities. And those activities are typically regen ag, transformation through to regen ag, and nature-based solutions. So how do we start it off? It's probably quite a good way in. The way we started it was that a few years ago, I was having a conversation with a chap called Andy Griffiths, who was working for Nestlé at the time, and we kind of figured out that Nestlé's milk supply in Cumbria was dependent on the same natural capital, or much of the same natural capital, as United Utilities, the local water company, was dependent on to manage phosphorus levels in the water catchments. So we kind of twigged that actually both of those organisations, Nestlé and United Utilities, could just split the costs of funding farmers to do activities that would look after those soils and improve those soils, and do that job of building resilience in the milk supply for Nestlé, and helping manage phosphorus levels in the water catchments up in northern Cumbria. So that's kind of how we got it going. And we've kind of just repeated and scaled and systematized that basic model. And we've grown it, across the UK. We're operating in east of England. We're operating in Yorkshire. We're operating now up in Scotland. We've got an active networks of these kind of transactions happening in Italy and Hungary and Poland. And from those fairly small and simple kind of transactions in the first instance, we've transacted about 37, by the end of this year, 37 million euros worth of money going from private sector businesses to farmers to support them through a regenerative agriculture transition. and we're operating actively operating on about 80,000 hectares of land at the moment. It's growing all the time, and working with about 350 ever-growing number of farmers. So it's a simple formula that we're kind of growing out within a range of different regions. 3 key features of Lens. One is that it's demand focused. We start with demand unashamedly, and that demand is different for different companies. So the water companies might be interested in water quality or water quantity. A food company, food manufacturer, very likely to be interested in the resilience of supply into their factories. Can they get quality, availability, and right price for feedstock into their factories? But they're also wanting reportable carbon and nature outcomes. So different demand for different people, for different organisations. But we start with the demand. It's a collaborative. It's collaborative commerce. So we club together those demand side organisations. We club together farmers. That's really critical for the way in which Lens operates. From the farmer's perspective, that means that they can collectively negotiate. They can pull together coherent packages of measures and negotiate together to get good prices for doing that work, which is a service to the demand side. Third really key critical element of Lens is that it is place-based. And what that means is that what we're doing is directly relevant to the demand-side organisations that we're servicing. It's their supply chains that are being built, that the resilience is being built in. And it's also critical because it means that what we do is responsive to regional place-based needs. You can't just have measures that matter in the Leven in Scotland aren't going to be exactly the same as the ones that matter in east of England or down in the Prosecco region in Italy. It has to be place-based for that reason. The really critical element of that place-based element is that actually what we're doing is we're building communities of businesses on the demand side, but critically on the farmer side. And so actually as we pull together these communities of farmers, they talk with each other, they do business with each other, they collaborate, and they innovate and create really amazing new ways of farming to deliver against that demand need and also to build the resilience of their farms. Have I got a few more seconds?
1 more minute.
1 more minute. Okay. Well, Teresa asked me to give a bit more of a focus on demand and how we work with demand. That is a big focus of how we've operated this and grown this and built the opportunity for farmers. And I guess I just had 3 things. We've got an increasing number of demand-side organisations working for us. We work with about 35 at the moment, and those extend between, as I said, food manufacturers through water companies, utilities, insurance companies, and beyond. Those 3 components that I talk about are that demand focus, being commercially driven is really critical for what we're doing, and it gives us a focus on the customer essentially. It's really critical when we do this that we don't need I don't need the customer to believe in my vision for a landscape. I need to be able to convince them that I'm delivering against their needs. It's a really important customer-focused way of getting things to transact. Second key point I'd talk about is that this is collaborative commerce, and that collaboration is really important when we're talking about building meaningful interventions and activities on the land, and that's because different organisations, one organisation might be sourcing wheat from a landscape and they want regenerative wheat that's more resilient. It's kind of not a meaningful thing to put to a farmer who's managing that wheat within a rotation, within a wider farm system, within a landscape. And so we get that coherent ask by plugging together different off-takers asking who've got interest in different crops around a rotational livestock and other players who are interested in the wider outcomes of the farm. So that gives you a coherent whole, essentially. So it helps with cost sharing, but most importantly, it means we're asking a joined up ask. The third thing I'll just finish on, is that I think demand evolves over time. We can't assume that the demand that is wanted now is going to be the same as the demand in 10 years' time. We're seeing a lot of compliance demand at the moment around carbon and biodiversity, and that's absolutely really critical. We all know that's really critical. but we sense that material risk and resilience is going to be going way up people's agendas over the next few years. And we need to be prepared for a marketplace which evolves from compliance through to material resilience. And there I shall stop.
Thank you, Tom. Well, that's two new words for me: material resilience and collaborative commerce. We've got time for one question. Gentleman at the front here. That's our roving mic.
Thanks, Tom. It was great. I just wondered how you deal with it in terms of collaboration agreements between the farmers and the entity you're dealing with, and within that, how it works in terms of additionality, in terms of what they're being paid for, and how that fits with their normal claims for SFI or whatever it might be.
Yeah, great questions. So the first bit, and I could go into more detail, but I won't, but the first bit is simply, well, not simply. It's a big job of work in terms of creating these collaborative contracts. Essentially, these are multi-party transactions essentially that are formalised within contracts, and essentially we do that through some hard miles of legals that have pulled together templates for that. So that's how things get transacted, and that kind of works for the farmer end and for the demand side end for allocations and that sort of stuff. In terms of additionality, Lens has focused on material risk and not on credits essentially. So we do scope 3 emissions which don't have additionality issues, and we're basically dealing with is a water company's infrastructure getting flooded anymore? Are they getting phosphorus in the water supply? They want to see an outcome of that service. They don't need to claim or watch out for additionality around their claim. They just want the outcome essentially, and the same for resilience of supply. And so that's how we get around additionality. In terms of how does it link with government schemes, SFI, we work in conjunction with them essentially. So if a group of farmers can put together a package of measures that is partially funded by SFI, then that's great, and that goes into the negotiation and builds better value for money. So yeah, essentially that's how we do it.
Tom, thank you very much. Fascinating. Our next speaker is John Dearsley, who heads natural capital within Savills, and is going to be talking about how we deal with natural capital within tenancies and farming contract agreements. We found this to be a really important issue within the Environmental Farmers Group. So, John, thank you very much for shedding light on that.
No problem at all. I'll try my best. As I stand here and look round, I can see at least 3 solicitors, but the one who's literally written a book on this topic has already used his quota for questions today, so I'm quite relieved. I'm equally aware that this can be quite a dry topic. Sorry, Ben. But what I wanted to do was just wow you with an AI-generated image and then some fancy PowerPoint to make it grow on screen. The reason for that waste of time is purely, if there's one thing to remember today, is we've got to say yes, and we've got to grow the cake as big as possible. So however we slice that cake up between landlord and tenant, between contractors, graziers, whatever else it might work on, in 21st century agriculture, we've got to make sure that cake is literally as big as possible, because it's got to layer so many bits together to make businesses viable. That, though, is also going to rely a huge amount of collaboration. There was a point earlier about how different parties work together, the data, the science, everything that comes into this. And I think anyone who feels that, just a farmer, inverted commas, is going to do all of this is perhaps missing all the wider elements that can come together that need to feed into this. So my 2 points really are, let's get this cake as big as possible, and then let's collaborate about it. But people like me do occasionally have to write agreements and work out how this is actually going to sit together. So Teresa asked us to give a case study, and what I wanted to do was use one of a contract farming agreement on a 600-hectare farm just over the road from where Alex lives, actually, so very close by. And this one was really based with trying to write down some guiding principles about how all this slots together. So, our guiding principles. Now, I think first of all, I'm equally aware that when you sit here with someone like Savills written on your front, you have a bullseye on your back. So let's just go for this and take it in good faith. We can have a case-by-case discussion as you need to. The first one of which is we need to try and differentiate between different income streams and how they might sit within these agreements. So what I've called operator-led, an operator could be tenant, it could be contractor, for example. This tends to lead towards land sharing areas. So SFI payments, emission reduction payments, the Agreena stand is literally right next door. There's a whole heap of other ones, maybe from Lens or from others who will sleed into this. And these tend to be short-term revenue-based payments that tend not to have an effect on capital value, and they tend to be reversible. So i.e. there's no permanence linked with these. And because of that, they're very much more associated with the farming activities, the day-to-day farming activities that go on. And from that revenue-based payment can come into the operator-led activities. The landowner-led activities, though, seem to fall into the other categories. So it tends to be about land sparing, taking blocks of land, drawing red lines around them and saying you're going to be used for this. Examples being BNG projects, afforestation projects, etc. And because of that long-term impact, they tend to have capital payments associated with them, and they tend to therefore have an effect on capital values. We can have a really good debate about the value of land, but actually a lot of these things have effects on capital values. And in those situations, my default position is that should probably be led by the landowner and driven from that situation. Now, the two are intrinsically linked. Back to point one on the start, they very much rely on each other. A lot of what the operator might want to do needs the inverted commas consent of the landowner through the agreements that are in place. Equally, landowners often need the skills, expertise of the operators to physically undertake the activities on land. I'm equally aware that there's still some unknowns in this space. So, agroforestry, is that operator-led or landlord-led? Again, this is some of those examples where we need to try and think through the practicalities and make the cake as big as possible, accepting there's not going to be a single answer. The other one was on there was slurry stores. I don't mean just slurry stores. I mean investment in things where there's actually needs to be a long-term capital outlay, but there's a long benefit that could come through revenues. So, if you can better manage slurry as a really simple example, or import it from another farm or whatever else like that, is clear benefit to the operator, but it probably needs some sort of capital outlay to put onto that. In those situations, at least my approach is looking at investment return and looking at risk, and those two things sit together with all forms of investment. So I promised to lay this together. Like I say, this is a real-life example. Cotswold, lump of rock at 1,000 feet, not necessarily the best arable land in the world. And I think probably the bit that really frames that is that if we ran this contract farming agreement 10, 15 years ago, we probably would have had 10 plus viable applicants. Now, realistically, we're down to 2 or 3. And, it's almost, please, can you come and farm with us, rather than would you like the opportunity to come and farm with us? And so, that is the changing shape of this. And what we wanted to do was set up a contract farming agreement that avoided conflict. So if something is right for the farm, for the land, for the underlying natural capital assets that are there, we don't want a contract to be thinking, crikey guys, I've got to get so many acres through my combine to remain viable. Or a landowner going, well, I can chip the first charge a little bit here by taking land out and doing it differently. It had to all go into the pot and therefore be worked through. And what we've ended up with is a really sort of diverse farming system, a lot of arable, a lot of sheep, 2 different lots of cattle. So there's cattle in terms of some outside roaming on the valleys. There's actually also a 150 cow, fairly intensive beef finishing unit. And that's about, utilising forage from SFI agreements and things like that, and rotations within the arable cropping. And then there's all the other bits, so I'm not going to read out because you can see them in times tight. But ultimately, it's about how we layer those payments in. And what we've ended up with is 2.5 years later, a fairly healthy operating situation where farm profitability has gone up from the sort of fairly traditional contract farming agreement that was in place before. But also both parties are incentivized to bring new ideas to the table. So, the contract is very much looking at a regenerative wheat contract, quite a niche one. But even though it's going to yield him less, he's going to put fewer acres through that combine, it's still in his benefit to bring that to the table and grow that cake even bigger. So that was all I was going to say, but thank you very much. And any questions?
Thank you. So I think the message is the bigger the cake, the more there is to share. So that's got to be good. If there is an immediate question, we'll take it, but otherwise we'll take more questions at the end after our last speaker, Doug, has had a go. I'm not seeing any hands go up. So, John, thank you very much. And take that target off your back. We'll stick it back on later when you're behind the table at the end for the speed dating. And our final speaker this morning is Doug Wanstall, who is a farmer in Kent, but has really picked up the natural capital battle and has led the development of the UK Carbon Code of Conduct. And he's going to talk today about high integrity carbon credits. Doug, thank you very much.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for inviting me along. So, yes, I still very much identify as a farmer, but I do spend most of my time now working in carbon project development and also running the UK Carbon Code. So I'm here today to talk about a specific project, and that's with the Met Office. About 18 months ago, the Met Office ran a tender process to look for an organisation or a group of organisations to help them create projects to offset their carbon emissions from 2030. Having gone through a very rigorous process and a lot of due diligence and satisfying 700 climate scientists, we must be doing something right. So with the Met Office, we're working with 3 farms, and this isn't about the Met Office need to offset in the region of 7,000 tonnes a year from 2030, and these 3 projects won't deliver all of that carbon that's required. What this project is about proving concept, and we've got 3 farms, 2 in Devon and 1 in the Lake District that we're working with. So we start by creating a project map. So this is an example. So we start by creating collecting lots of data and communicating it on this dashboard. So this dashboard is developed by one of the project developers called Beyond Zero, which I also work with. This is the kind of the physical manifestation of all of the data that's required for what we term as a high integrity carbon credit. The UK Carbon Code was set up really as a means because there was not a whole farm holistic code that could take in all natural capital opportunities and take all opportunities to reduce emissions. And that was our goal. Every farm has got lots of different areas of natural capital and lots of different opportunities to remove emissions. We wanted them to benefit from all of those opportunities. So one of the first things we do is create a habitat map. So this is created to UK Hab Level 3. So this is all created through aerial photographic interpretation and to a 1 meter resolution. And this also acts as a sort of precursor to BNG. So this helps the project developer identify areas that the farmer might use to forward for potential BNG when that market finally matures. We then count every tree and every metre of hedgerow on the farm. So we use blue sky data. So there's a blue sky data. They create the national tree map, and they can count every tree above 2 metres, and it's very accurate. We've done this whole process for the entire island of Jersey. And every farmer that we go to. And we do a fair bit of ground truthing as well. So occasionally, it throws up an anomaly. So we have to send somebody to go and have a look and ground truth the data. And what this does, it gives us opportunity. This starts to open up. Okay, so where are the opportunities? Where can we plant more trees? Where can we place more hedges? And to optimise the benefits. We then create a soil carbon baseline. So this is measured, not modelled. We don't believe that you can accurately predict or measure soil carbon from space. We believe that it can give you an indication of fluxes, i.e. is it going up, is it going down, but you can't actually physically measure soil carbon from space. And this, there's a few dials here, all showing different types of carbon. But what we're really interested in is in the bottom right-hand corner, which shows that the average on this farm is currently 51 tonnes per hectare of soil organic carbon. But what the dial shows is the minimum. I can't actually read it. I've got the wrong glasses on. But the bottom figure is about 20 tonnes per hectare, and the top figure is about 150, maybe even more than that. So what that does is that shows what the potential is if we can instigate some significant soil enhancement processes, what the potential is to increase that soil organic matter. And soil carbon increases really do represent one of the greatest opportunities in so many ways to increase or to remove atmospheric carbon. Over the last sort of 50 to 70 years, we've managed to remove almost all the carbon from agricultural soils, and we've got a real opportunity to start putting that back again. And then we do a full, so every project has to do a full emissions audit. So all scopes 1, 2, and 3, and all counting all greenhouse gases, and then it's reported as a CO2 equivalent. So this farm here, this is a mixed beef, poultry, and arable farm up in the lakes, or just on the edge of the lakes. As you can see, they have got a long way to go before they get to net zero. And we will only allow the sale of high integrity carbon credits once a farm has passed that net zero status. So this guy's got a lot of work to do. But then what we do, we start to look at the opportunities to remove that carbon from his system. So this is integrated with Land App. We then look at the opportunities, and this particular farm, so the sort of the grey and bluey shaded area, that's about 400 acres of upland, very low grade upland ground, but it's in a highly sensitive area for water quality, and it holds a lot of potential to reduce flooding risk further downstream. So with this particular area, we're examining the plantation of about 200 acres of trees in both a full afforestation and in sort of a wood pasture type scenario. And we think that with the changes that we're proposing, he will be able to maintain the same numbers of stock, but plant an awful lot of trees that will do an awful lot of good for water quality, for carbon removal, and for flood prevention. And then the orange shaded areas, that's sort of better quality grassland, and that's actually pastures that are renewed on a regular basis. We think there's an opportunity there too. It's on the edge of the Lake District, so we're currently trying to work out what species of forage will work best, but we think there's an opportunity to move from a set stocking system to a mob grazing system with multi-species. That again is one of the best ways that we know to accelerate carbon removal. And then once the carbon balance has been managed, and we then get to that net zero status, once the project has gone beyond that net zero, the credits are issued, and then they're put onto the UK Carbon Code Registry, where they're sold. And in this case, they're being sold, or will be sold, allocated to the Met Office. How am I doing? Very good. Well, I'll leave it there then.
Doug, thank you very much. So can we thank all our speakers who've been great this morning. We now have time for general questions for any of the speakers, and then we will go into the speed dating opportunity to speak individually and privately to the speakers and anybody else who's decided to put themselves forward from the demand side. So, any questions, please? Blue shirt in the central aisle, and I've got another one there. We'll come to you.
Michael, one question is, so Tom, you're obviously working with an insurer. How can we get more insurers to pay for flood risk mitigation, as they seem to be one of the biggest beneficiaries?
I think it's a huge unlock, actually, and we're only just starting to work with insurers. I think some of that game might be directly them funding stuff on the ground, but actually, which is what we've had a little bit of. But actually, I think it's the relationship between the insurers and those infrastructure companies, because as those infrastructure companies and others fund stuff which builds resilience, for example, flood risk management and resilience for them, their risk goes down. Their risk for their investors, but also for their insurers, go down. And if those insurers can be rewarding them for doing that, for being within a more resilient, lower risk landscape, then they'll be incentivized to fund it. So I think there's a kind of chain of incentives there, which I think is really, really important. But obviously, insurers are really interested directly. Their big worry is stuff that is uninsurable. Essentially, they need it to be in that kind of Goldilocks space of risky enough that people will buy the insurance and not too risky that they can't insure it. So I think they do have an interest. So I'd say there's two routes.
Can I just jump? So I think we're missing a massive open goal here with the insurance companies. So the fundamental problem is that we've got, let's say, a dozen insurance underwriters, and they've all each got 7-8% of the market, which means they're not incentivized at all to get in and actually go and put mitigation measures in place. If a community, and this is where a cluster or a catchment element comes into it. So for me, if the community around Cirencester gets together and goes, actually, the one thing that we can really do to make the market round here is we can try and all use, as many of us as possible, the same insurance company, then that insurance company is very exposed to risk in that location and therefore incentivized to go and actually do something about it and put mitigation measures in place. But you need, this is how the market can be made quicker, but that is a massive ask to do at a community level. But that would be one way to definitely drive demand into an area.
Thank you. Really good question. We've got another question, sort of pinkish shirt on the right, my right.
Thanks very much. Nick Sanford from the Royal Countryside Fund. I want to ask a question about the risk-reward of this. You obviously need a great deal of expertise, and I've been hugely impressed by the presentations and the technical expertise. If a farmer's interested in going to this, how much upfront cost or liability might they have in getting all these reports, information done, or is that somehow covered? I mean, I could see that it'd be quite an expensive exercise, that someone's got to cover those costs. And how much of that is upfront cost before you get any guarantee you might get the reward of the whatever it is, the carbon, the BNG or whatever?
Doug, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, sure. So yes, this comes at quite a large cost, but we have different models, different funding models. So the Met Office clearly funded the work that we did with the farms that I showed you today. But equally, we've got other investors that are looking to that do invest in the upfront cost, and then they're looking for a return on investment, and they're looking for a return on investment of about 11%, and they will get their cash back once credits are sold. But some farmers do pay for it up front themselves, and actually probably about 50% of our clients are paying for themselves, and then we are then matching them with an offtake partner, hopefully a long-term offtake partner, and quite often that's the case. But to answer your question directly, our system it really does cost between £50 and £60 per hectare to get started. That's a year one, and then about £10 thereafter for monitoring and approval, continual monitoring and approval.
So this issue of cost is a real one. John wanted to come in, and also Tom in a minute. So John, you first.
Yeah, my point is just very, very quickly. I think we've got to look at this space as a business stream on the farm, on the estate, whatever it is. And it's like all businesses. You've got to put something in to get something out. And it's an entrepreneurial marketplace. So I think the people who will make the most of this are the ones who invest. And that could be cash, it could be time, it could be coming to Groundswell and listening to speakers. But I think it's about you need to... it's not about filling in a form on the 15th of May and getting a cheque in December. It is about going out and making a market.
Yeah, I support all of that. Our experience in our section of the marketplace in Lens is that a lot of our emphasis is on getting revenues in early for the farmers and building things up over time, so they're not exposed in terms of capital outlay, and essentially sharing that risk and that cost along the supply chain, building a collaborative supply chain. There's a mutual benefit from the people buying the outcomes as they are selling them. So I think that's, yeah. Go on, Alex, yeah.
Yeah, just look at the opportunities in front of you and look very individually at them. So if you're after woodland carbon units, or that's something you might want to develop and you're in England, the UCO and the WCPG has never been so beneficial. The grants have never been as good to create woodland in England. And how long will that last for? We've just had the spending review. It looks like they've committed to that, although I see the Chancellor's having some problems yesterday. So who knows what will happen? If that's not there and you've got to go and find all the capital to deliver those projects, it's a completely different ask for the market to then come in and do that. In Scotland, we're needing to find at least 20% of the capital cost to deliver a project from a woodland creation perspective, just to make that, to make it happen. Whereas in England, generally, if you're north of about 10 hectares, you're pretty much the grants will basically cover your costs, and so it starts to become viable. But the small projects, it is hard to make the sums stack up. As soon as you can get, from a woodland perspective, north of about 10 hectares, in the lowlands, then you're in a very strong position in England.
Thank you. So we've got one more question down here and another one over there. So let's go here first, and then we'll come back to you, madam.
Thank you. As a practical farmer, I'm interested in the bottom line. Two-part question. Firstly, am I better raping the land first, so I'm coming from a really low point? Secondly, what sort of money? Nobody mentioned actually income. How much money will I gain?
I'm a farmer too, so I can speak fluent farmer to farmer. We did this because we could see an opportunity for farmers. Okay, so we were concerned that if we weren't careful, big institutions would steal our carbon and steal the opportunity away from us. So every farm's different. We won't take on a farm if there is not a return on investment, but we can normally see first year's costs covered and a bit more. And then it becomes more lucrative as time goes on. But it does come down to how ambitious you are as well, and how much change you want to make. Because we see some farms that are incredibly aspirational.
If it'll pay, I will do it.
Yeah, great. And that's the answer we get from virtually every farm we talk to. Yeah.
I would just very quickly add, I think we've got to be aware of the shift from the carrot to the stick, and we're getting more stick and less carrot as time moves on.
And I just reiterate it. I mean, from our perspective, it has to pay, and it does pay. This is about a value proposition to someone who's then going to pay for that. But also, ultimately, what our farmers, I think, are doing is they're building their long-term resilience of their own farm business, as well as diversifying the income streams en route. You're exactly right. It has to pay. It has to pay for you. It has to pay for the demand side ultimately as well. It's about business, isn't it?
And at the end of the day, nobody's mentioned figures. Are we talking replacing single farm payment? More than that? Less than that? I know it's on a farm scale, depending how much you're doing, but has anybody got an idea of range of cost, income we're going to get from it?
I think almost the worst thing to do, and I've been asked this a lot, is to try and compare any of this to BPS payments. Just honestly, forget about the BPS payment. Obviously, the last bit's coming in. Do not try to compare it to. We've got to make up for that. It's almost impossible.
I'm not trying to make up. I'm just trying to get an idea of how much you can.
Well, it depends. It depends what project you do. And if you put the whole farm into woodland, you're going all down a woodland carbon route. Are you getting? What are you doing with it? Does that allow you to then stack another enterprise on it? You're going down the BNG route, putting into that. It depends on the scale that you do something. So it's almost impossible to ask that until you know what you want to do on the land. And
if I plant 10 hectares of woodland, what sort of would I get?
Well, so if you do your 10 hectares, you're going to end up with, if you're a lowland farm, somewhere in the region roughly of 500 tonnes of carbon total per hectare over that lifetime. It then depends when you sell it. Those trees have got to grow. Are you going to go, right, well, I'm going to take the risk and I'm going to sell that forward, or I'm going to wait for each of the verifications and sell a few units each time? It depends then what the value that you sell those units at. We've all just seen £125 a tonne for some units, not a particularly realistic scenario. £20 to £50 is much more realistic. Does that move the dial? I'm a farmer as well. I'm going to plant about 25 hectares this winter. I've just gone through 18 months of getting through the woodland creation planning grant on it. It's a slow process just to get started on that. So it depends what you're trying to survive over, what revenue you're trying to replace. But I think, as John said, it's complex, and you've got to be quite entrepreneurial about it. It is not just looking for the form to fill out. And I would just encourage everyone to start to plan as much as you can now, on the assumption that there might not always be an SFI type payment, or it might not always be as viable as you want it to be. So at least know where you can go if that is not the option.
Thank you. And I promise this lady will take her question. So one more, and then we'll go into your opportunity to ask people specifically, and perhaps with more financial detail, as to what might be possible on your own farm.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll be as quick as I can. As a farming business and farming family based in Scotland, what we've done, we've already gone ahead and looked at opportunities for capitalising on natural capital carbon. Doing that, given that collaboration scale will bring in the best benefits, if having already approached possible sources of natural capital income, would that compromise us as a farming business in the event that there was a lens type, collaborative scale type project opportunity that comes up at a later date with different methodologies and different approaches to analysis? So if you're too quick into this, are you actually losing benefit? Thank you.
I mean, as you stack up and build your enterprise and do exactly as you're doing, being an entrepreneur, there are opportunity costs potentially, aren't there? Essentially, within a lens context, essentially we need as groups of farmers or as the lens program to be providing value for money for the people who are buying it. And so essentially, if there's already activities there that have locked in carbon, others aren't going to be paying for those activities again, essentially, just because it's already delivering for them. But that doesn't mean there aren't other aspects of what other services you could be providing, either within a lens type market or within the other sorts of markets that people have been talking about. So I think it's important to get in and start doing, essentially. But absolutely, in terms of long-term commitments and things where additionality comes into play, like carbon credits, then just be aware of those potential trade-offs and opportunity costs. But the right thing is to be getting in there and being entrepreneurial. But I think, yeah.
But the different methods could be merged. So if we had gone for a particular approach, and then something comes up in the future, what we've done perhaps can't resell, but we could merge the methodologies and the analysis.
I think that's part of the stacking point. Yeah.
Okay.
Or dip into different markets if you're collaborating. That gives you more flexibility. Yeah. But I know Doug and Alex want to briefly contribute to this one.
Thank you.
Yeah, so one of the reasons we took the decision to count all natural capital was to ensure that people who have planted hedges 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and maintained them to get rewarded, because essentially what you're doing is those hedgerows are contributing to your reduced overall total emissions by removing carbon. And so we would say get on with it. Take action, and the point is, if you've planted it, you should be rewarded for it. But when you come into our system, for instance, you still need to do lots of additional things and additional actions, but you won't get penalised for having planted those hedges 10 years ago.
Thank you.
You're basically asking when do you make a risk mitigated, risk managed decision? And everybody will do it in a different way. But you need to gather as much information as you can. So if you're 40 miles from the McVitie's factory, or whatever it may be, I would definitely be looking at Lens as an opportunity to go, right, well, can I, even if I'm not in that, this could be a great opportunity. We've had the ability for the grants to drop off to support some of the capital payments. The Woodland Carbon Code is about to slightly move some of the goalposts, which will make it slightly easier for some projects to get in under it. That's a government-supported standard. Do you go outside of that because it's potentially not working? These are not easy decisions to make, and ultimately, all you can really do is gather as much information together as possible, and then move when you are ready to do that, or do it when you're ready to move.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, brilliant questions, all of them. Hopefully the session has demystified some of this, highlighted some opportunities, but it's also highlighted the complexity of the individual decisions that you as farmers have to make. So if you would like to talk to any of our speakers about the demand side, we will be setting up at the back of the tent. Each person will have a sign saying who they are, and do go and ask some questions. And we'll be doing that right now. Thank you very much.